This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. Phil is a man, the top of my inbox, who is after my own heart. He's texted me already this morning to say, really pleased you're covering the LTN subject, James. The Venn diagram of stop the boat supporters, anti-vaxxers and low-level traffic local management is as bizarre as it is baffling, which is precisely the point that the producer of this programme made shortly before we came on air. It is as bizarre as it is baffling. Why would they go hand in hand with each other? The answer perhaps is individualism. We'll get onto this shortly. Before that, I want to confide in you. Some mornings I come on air and I charge myself with the job of making you interested in the thing that it is that I want to talk about. Other days I try and second guess what you will be interested in, and sometimes allow the tail, which is you, to wag the dog, which is me. And I don't know. I wish there was some sort of scientific survey available to us. I wish every single person listening, or every single person in the country even, had a little keypad in front of them. And then at 5 to 10 every morning, I could ask you a succession of questions. But even that wouldn't be completely reliable to gauge your level of interest, because the story that is simultaneously boring, baffling and brilliant at the moment is the story of the what's-a-chops, the Princess of Wales. But I don't think you want to talk about it. Oh, and if you do want to talk about it, I don't think you've got anything interesting to say. And I don't particularly want to talk about it unless you want to talk about it, in which case you would have to have something interesting to say to make me want to talk about it. And I don't want to talk about it, and I don't have anything interesting to say, except it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder. So apparently they went to a garden centre this weekend with no photographers, and yet they have used some footage taken by a completely random member of the public sitting in the driver's seat of his car to prove that she's fine, which means that they wanted it to be released that she's fine, but they didn't take any photographers with them to take pictures to show that she's fine. They instead relied upon the vaguely coincidental possibility of one other customer at this garden centre taking some footage of her. I don't know that I'd have recognised them. He, like me, William, wears a baseball cap in public to avoid the attention of hoi polloi. But I don't know. What is it? I mean, it's the biggest story in the country, according to international media. And I just have absolutely no idea what's going on. It's the strangest thing. Now, that's confession number one. Confession number two is that I can't come on air every morning and say that I've got no idea what's going on. It doesn't work like that. I mean, usually I have a fairly clear bead on what's happening. But on a story like that, I genuinely have no clue. So that's a very roundabout way of explaining why I won't be talking about that today. Unless, I don't know, some sort of weird miracle happens and we find a way of doing it in an interesting fashion. Something really strange happened on Sunday. I mean, truly strange in the context of politics. What happened on Sunday is that the Department for Transport issued a bunch of press releases, position papers, 11, no fewer than 11 documents, if you like, several of which focused on the phenomenon known as low traffic neighbourhoods, or LTNs. And buried in among these documents was a report commissioned by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. I think this is extraordinary. Do you remember the Uxbridge and Ruislip by-election, when a Conservative politician, a Conservative candidate, unexpectedly pipped the Labour candidate at the post to the tune of about 500 votes? And everybody thought that it was because the public hated the ultra-low emission zone. And in a way, they were right. But the reasons why voters in that constituency hated the ultra-low emission zone is that they thought that they were going to have to pay a charge. They thought that their cars would not be exempt. Within about a week, I said to you on the day, I said, this story is going nowhere. This is going to be the dampest squib that you have ever seen. And the Conservative Party was at the time building its entire policy platform around the idea that there was a sort of war on motorists, and that by coming down on the side of the motorists, there would be a electoral jackpot. They would come that we will protect the motorists. And I remember thinking, because I spoke to people in Uxbridge, my friend Scott lives there, so I did proper research, and I remember, and they were all telling me everyone's going to vote Tory, everyone's got a problem with the ULEZ, and I'd say, have they checked whether or not they're going to have to pay the charge? because I don't think any of them are going to have to pay the charge. And of course, within a week of the charge coming in, everybody realised that it didn't apply to them. But this was the point at which Rishi Sunak decided to commission research showing that low traffic neighbourhoods were bad. This was part of his war on. War on moron. So war on moron. The war on motorists, right? War on motorists. So on Sunday, the report was published. And I don't think you've heard hide nor hair of it, have you? You don't know what's in this report. The Prime Minister, convinced that an electoral jackpot can be delivered by waging war on motorists, commissions a report to prove that low traffic neighbourhoods are a bad and unpopular thing, an idea culled almost wholesale from your Uncle Keith's Facebook page, commissions the report is published, and you've heard nothing about it. Now, why might that be? Why might that be? Well, you know why that might be, because it turns out that they're actually doing really well. They are effective in achieving outcomes of reducing traffic volumes within internal roads. They have succeeded in improving air quality on internal roads. There has been less street crime and improved safety within low traffic neighbourhoods. And when they point to international evidence, it supports the findings of this report of UK LTNs. Tactical urbanism interventions in Barcelona led to a significant decrease in traffic levels, with an average relative reduction of about 14.8%. And it continues. Those living in areas where rat running has been removed now have a, quote, better quality of life. This is a Department for Transport report, commissioned by a Prime Minister who thought it was going to deliver bad news that he could then use to wage his war on motorists. By reducing traffic and emissions, LTNs can contribute to a cleaner, safer environment within schemes. This, in turn, can encourage active travel and improve quality of life. They then look at other studies in San Francisco and Toronto showing that cyclists and pedestrians are now spending more money per month in commercial, and so it goes on. 300 million, there's data coming out of their ears. And yet it has barely been mentioned at all, because they are trying to do the war on motorists. Now, I want to come at this, if we can today, from a slightly more philosophical perspective. And I want to try to get inside. So we'll do two phone-ins. We'll do the slightly weird one that I don't expect will go very well, because motoring phone-ins are not my real cup of tea. But are they working for you? No, that doesn't work, does it? That's boring. Don't ring me on that. Do not ring me. Don't put that phone. No, don't ring me on that. I want to try to work out why there is an issue here. I want to try to work out what it is about being having a certain petrol head disposition that makes you think there's a war against you. I think, I don't want to alienate you. I've already told you not to ring in, and now I'm about to insult you. I think it's pathetic. I think it is probably, I know snowflake is supposed to be used to describe liberals by very, very thin-skinned right-wing people who think they're tough. But I don't think I've come across anything more pathetic than the claim that there's a war on motorists. You need to drive slowly through areas where children might be crossing the road. Oh, there's a war on motorists. You have to try to reduce the amount of poison that you're pumping into the atmosphere that we all breathe. Oh, there's a war on motorists. They're trying to reduce the likelihood of people bombing down urban side streets in order to shave 5 minutes off their journey, because the people that live on those side streets don't like having cars flying past at all hours. There's a war on motor. I just think it's the biggest pile of crud that I have ever come across in all the years that I've been following politics on this programme. The idea that there was a war on motorists was ridiculous. The proof that there was never a war on motorists, that people who live in low traffic neighbourhoods actually like it, is clear. And the government aren't advertising their own research because it flies in the face of what they thought would be a rhetorical victory, a rhetorical jackpot. And yet I know that if I was built in a slightly different way, I could open up the phone lines now and deal with a long queue of people absolutely adamant that there's a war on motorists. So where does the idea come from? 0345 6060973. And given that if I have just called you pathetic, it's possible that I've deterred you from ringing in, which means that the challenge falls to the rest of us of trying to work out, what does this appeal to inside someone? Who is the mythical voter who actually enjoys being told that they are being persecuted? It's this idea that there is a war. I mean, everybody, no one goes anywhere really without some sort of use of motor vehicles, whether it's public transport, whether you're in a taxi or an Uber, whether you're driving yourself or someone else is driving you. That the idea that you can divide the population into motorists and non-motorists is objectively ridiculous. One of the stupidest things you ever hear in these sort of conversations is the idea that cyclists only ever cycle. Pretty much every cyclist on the streets is also a motorist, is also a driver. The psychology of the so-called war on motorists is simultaneously befuddling and fascinating to me. So just tell me what you think. Tell me where you think it comes from. Okay? 0345 60973 is the number that you need. The personality type that is in focus here. The idea that who are I can't do this. I said to you yesterday, they've done something awful. Who on earth are they trying to appeal to? But I am supremely unsurprised to discover that low traffic neighbourhoods, and I'm quoting the local government association now, low traffic neighbourhoods are popular as they reduce traffic, making neighbourhoods safer by encouraging more people to walk, wheel or cycle, and can improve air quality. That to me was obvious from the start. And yet I could turn on my radio or open up a newspaper and be bombarded with angry-sounding people insisting that this was either a conspiracy against their liberties, it was evidence of the World Economic Forum trying to take over the world, the people behind the low-traffic neighbourhoods were in cahoots with the vaccine manufacturers and dedicated to diluting our humanity in every imaginable way. The strangest thing in the political landscape in the last 12 months was Rishi Sunak's adamant insistence that he was going to wage a war on the war on motorists. And if you think I'm exaggerating, it's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today. They're trying to resurrect it again. Councils launch new war on motorists as half of drivers face fines. Now, this is a story about half of drivers facing fines if they commit offences. So if you don't want to get a fine, don't commit a traffic offence. So that's what I want to try to do today. I want to try to unpick the psychology, the philosophy even, and the politics of the war on motorists that never was. Okay? Now, try not to be boring. That's my challenge to you. I'm going to give you the phone number. I want you to ring in 0345 6060 973. In a way, the question that I'm asking is this: why does it appeal to some people? Lies about low traffic neighbourhoods, lies about war on. What is it psychologically that I haven't been born with? What is it that I lack? And you say to me, you're going to have to drive a bit slower. I don't go, oh my God, this is the end of the world as I know it. You say to me, you're going to have to go down that road and not that road. I'm mildly irritated for about 10 minutes, and then I get used to the new route. And that thing there, when they talk about, the Tories sat around a table and they thought, this is going to be the thing that turns it round for us. We're going to side with the motorists against, and that's where I lose the thread a bit. Against what? Against people that want cleaner air, people that want fewer road traffic accidents, people that want to be able to walk to the shops. Who's the enemy? If there is truly a war on motorists, then who is waging it? Because the government's own research has delivered the verdict that low traffic neighbourhoods are rather splendid. Do not ring me, no offence, do not ring me to tell me that they're wrong, and you know better, because you've been looking at your Uncle Keith's Facebook page. 10:17 is the time. Let's see how this goes. If you're new to the programme, I should probably warn you. The radio phoning historically makes great play with motoring-related issues. Part of the reason for this is a lot of people listen to the radio in the car. I have, for good or for ill, spent the last 20 years swimming furiously in the opposite direction. I'm not sure I've ever conducted a motoring-themed phone-in that I found interesting. But this one will be different, because it's not really about motoring. It's about psychology, and it's about politics. And it's about why people are so desperate to believe nonsense when they're invited to object to measures, ideas, policies that are clearly designed to improve everybody's lives. It's just weird, right?
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10. There has been a truce, a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities. Sadly, not in the Middle East, but in the war on motorists that Rishi Sunak was determined to wage. Or rather, he was determined to wage a war on the war on motorists. But it's all petered out, and I want to understand why. The psychology behind it, the madness of objecting to schemes and policies designed to improve everybody's quality of life. Shall we start on the Wirral? I think we should. Peter's there. Peter, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Yes. I think it's quite an interesting one. This is the sort of psychology game that Conservatives play.
Go on.
They realise they've got no chance of standing for the next government on the policies they've got. The country is broken. Most people will accept that.
Yes.
But a lot
Someone should write a book.
Yeah, maybe 3 books. That would be interesting. But most of the issues that the NHS, defence, things of that nature, most of these, like defence doesn't affect people really. It's in the background. NHS is only if you're ill or need cover.
Yes.
Not a problem. So what they're saying is, if we can keep them in the background, so what they're going to do is they're going to go for something that annoys individuals on a daily basis. I get annoyed with it. Then I speak to my friend. My friend goes on Facebook. Within days, it's a huge imposition on my.
But only on
rights.
your Uncle Keith's Facebook page. You don't really care about it. That's what, because for it to work, you either have to have a really effective lie out there, which is what happened in Uxbridge and Ruislip, and basically lots of people who weren't going to have to pay the ULEZ charge thought they were going to have to pay the ULEZ charge, so they voted against a politician that they associated with the ULEZ charge. Even Keir Starmer has sort of done another U-turn on this now and come out in favour of it, because it clearly was none of the things that people thought it was when they voted against it. So there aren't enough people here. And also it's non-existent. So if the government's own research is showing that low traffic neighbourhoods are a good thing, how do you sustain the anger on your Uncle Keith's Facebook page that they're a war on me, a war on you? I don't quite get it, because it's not true.
It isn't true, but the people we're describing and talking about, and there's quite a swathe of them. I know you're saying
there must be, but not as big a swathe as the Tories thought there would be, I don't think.
But can I just say, Dave, those people don't know about that report. I heard it on Laura Koonsberg on Sunday morning, where she challenged Mark Harper. Oh, yes. And he said there's been no consultation, and she said your report says it does. And Mark Harper looked at the camera and just ignored that. And that's how they do it. And for the average person who's being annoyed or inconvenienced by another 2-minute journey, they will latch on to that, and they know they will. Could I give you a quick example?
Very quick.
On the Wirral some years ago, after a consultation to do with inconsiderate dog walkers and dog fouling, our council said what we like to do is in school holidays, in certain parts of our beaches around the Wirral, is we'd like to segregate them. So only people and families can go. Dogs and people, you go to another place. And within days, there was a march of over 300 to 400 people marching with
against
their
that,
dogs.
Against the segregation.
Against it.
Because they just didn't like being told what to do.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying.
And that's who we're talking about here. So you just portray it as, so even if it's a really important thing, like a speed limit, if you're a very cynical politician, look at them over there, those busybodies telling you what to do, telling you to wear a seatbelt, telling you not to drive at 100 miles an hour through a built. Yeah, maybe you're right, but I guess there's a massive miscalculation on how big that constituency is going to be. I just want to make something clear. I am reading a report that the government commissioned in the hope of proving that low traffic neighbourhoods are unpopular, and the report has concluded that low traffic neighbourhoods are both popular and effective. I'm reading a report that the government commissioned, so there's no point telling me that my opinion is wrong. I'm reading a report that the government commissioned in the hope of proving that low traffic neighbourhoods were unpopular, in order to show them that their credentials for being on the side of the motorists in the war on motorists, and it's backfired horribly. So there's no point moaning about me being one-sided. I'm reading the government's own report 26 after 10. Thank you, Peter. Alan is in Manchester. Alan, what's going on?
Just as Peter in the world said, this story is being propagated because they're going to get hammered at the next election. And let me give you 2 examples. As I told your producer, I'm a councillor in Greater Manchester, and we installed what's called Cyclops junctions. They're cycle friendly, they're pedestrian friendly, and oh my God, when they were being installed, it was Armageddon, it was a war on motorists.
Yes.
What no one ever said, especially from the right, is the one next to Bury College, near Holy Cross College, actually enabled 9,000 students to negotiate, navigate, cross that road in perfect safety. It leads to Bury Market. The market traders love it. Then they did another one outside Bury Town Hall, and it was going to be the worst thing ever. I use it as a motorist every day. There's nothing wrong with it.
And you have lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, right. I'll give you another example, James. In 2018, I was summoned as representatives in Greater Manchester. The government had just lost this 3rd case against an organisation called Client Earth,
right,
who basically argued that the government was in breach of its own pollution limits, especially of nitrogen dioxide at curbside level, as in there were over 40 micrograms per cubic metre. The government then said, OK, this is now a local authority problem, over to you. I think it was 63 local authorities. You've got to clean up the air in the shortest time possible. That then became, Labour Party, because of, Andy Burnham's status in Greater Manchester, it became Andy Burnham's tax on the motorist.
So, right, hang on. Why? So, is it just circumstance that makes it left-right, politically speaking? Is it? I mean, it's just Sadiq Khan is mayor of London, Andy Burnham. Do they have it in Birmingham, where there's a Tory mayor? Is it the war on motorists? Is that not being waged in Birmingham, or is it only being waged in areas where there's a Labour mayor?
It probably, to be sure, I'm not sure what's going on, if I'm being honest with you.
But mate.
What they do,
go on.
What they do, James, it's going to be the war on the motorists. I'm speaking to you, parked up in my car.
Everyone's a motorist. I know, that's the mad bit about the whole conversation. I've been listening to it for 20 years. I've never understood who this divide is supposed to affect between the motorist and the non-motorist. But why is it a right-wing thing? So Phil started the conversation this morning with his text saying that it's a Venn diagram where you've got the... You've got the anti-vaxxers and you've got the stop the boats lot, and they'll be the ones that are angry about low traffic neighbourhoods, which is probably a bit unfair, but there's some truth in it. Why? Why is this a right-wing catnip?
They know that, James, they know that if the way it's going, they are going to get annihilated at the next general election.
So they're trying to attract anybody they can to their side of the room, and they think that by saying the other lot, if you're a motorist, the other lot are going to crucify you. Come and be with us. We'll look after you.
Let me give you another example, James. I used to work at Samsbury, which is near Blackburn. I could get there. I could get to Junction 17 of the M60 in about 35 minutes. I could then spend 20 minutes getting up the slip road.
Yeah.
Onto the junction, only to find that the traffic is caused by everybody entering a box junction.
Yeah, you've lost me now.
Where there's no exit.
You've lost me now.
Well, basically, you can't enter the box junction, right?
Stop it, seriously. That's enough now. No, you've made a really good contribution, but you lose me at the box junction. I can't.
James, thanks for recommending that book, by the way.
You're very welcome. It's a cracker. You should read my next one, How to Navigate Box Junctions. 10:30 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There was never any war on... Listen, if I've upset you, then I'm sorry. I don't mean to upset you. But if you're convinced that there is a war on motorists, I kind of need to hear your voice. So where is it? And how are you getting on? Have you been wounded? Have you been injured? Who's hurt you? Where is this war on motorists? Because the government commissioned a report to prove that low traffic neighbourhoods are bad, and the report has come back saying, actually, they're really very good. That kind of sums up Rishi Sunak, really, doesn't it? Oh, I've got a great idea, lads. I'm going to commission a report, and it'll come back and it'll say that low traffic neighbourhoods are really awful, and then we'll be the side of the motorists, and we'll do the war on the motorists, and everyone will vote for us. It'll just be like Uxbridge and Ruislip, woo, woo. And then the report comes back, it says low traffic neighbourhoods are great, and it just never mentions it again. That's it. It's okay, get rid of that report. Do not mention the report. It's like Basil Fawlty in The War. Don't mention the report. So how do you feel now if you thought there was a war on you because you're a motorist, and now you found out that there wasn't? Or if there was, they were firing blanks. You must feel a bit silly, no? Or are you just going to find something else to get angry with? Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:36. James is joking, and it's quite a good joke, but oddly, like all the best jokes, it contains a kernel of truth. He's texted to say, James, this is from James and to James. I'm James, he's James, we're both James, we're all James. James, it's all about the sovereignty of cars. And I think I think there is something in that. Someone says to you, because some people only feel powerful when they're in their car. The rest of the time, life is nasty, brutish and short. But there's something about a motor car that makes us feel, I don't know, almost extended. I mean, they talk about it being a penis extension, don't they? Sometimes sports cars. Luckily, I've never suffered from that particular malaise. But you can get that petrol head thing. You don't have to be Jeremy Clarkson to feel like a superhero when you get behind the wheel of a car. So depending upon how, I don't want to be unduly rude. I'm not going to say inadequate, but just depending upon how unfree. There you go. Is that a word? Is unfree a word? Depending on how unfree you feel when you're not in your car. Some people get into their car and that's the only time they really feel free and in control. There's a good phrase. You're in control of your destiny when you're in a car. The rest of the time, you're blowing around like a crisp packet in the wind. But you're in control. So what they do, I think, the Tories, they come along and say, when you're in control, that only time in your life when you're in control, you're free. You're free as a bird. That's why people like Alan Partridge have special anthems for when they're driving. It's like, in the car. And the Tories come along and say they're trying to spoil it. They're trying to make your car just as subject to rules and regulations and red tape as the rest of your life already is. And that's why I think, although James is joking when he says it's all about sovereignty, it is a bit Brexity, this. I wonder what the Venn diagram is between people who think that low traffic neighbourhoods are bad, people who voted for Brexit, people who think that their lives are being ruined not by the super rich and their right-wing political friends, but by refugees and I don't know, Polish lorry drivers or whatever it is. I wonder what the Venn diagram is. I don't like to bring anti-vaxxers into it because they're almost too mad to include in sensible conversations. But the rest of it, it's not a Venn diagram, is it? It's a circle. Be the same thing. Sovereignty. I didn't vote. I voted to be poorer because we've got more sovereignty. I want to be breathing poisonous air. I want there to be more accidents on the roads because our sovereignty. How dare you take away my sovereignty? Is this the closest that we get to the gun control debate? Is it people being told that they need to be a little bit more considerate, a little bit more environmentally friendly, and a little bit more what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more pleasant when they're in their motor cars, and they hear it as if they're trying to take my guns away. They're trying to take my freedom away. They think they're Braveheart. Gary's in Northwich. That's it. That's every call so far from the Northwest. I like that. Gary, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I'm quite interested in this. I worked for about 12 months for an active travel charity doing fundraising.
Okay. Yeah.
So I speak to hundreds of people on sort of canals and cycle paths, walking and cycling, trying to get them to join the charity. So I think most of the people I speak to, or I don't work there anymore, but most of the people I spoke to, they had a car as well. So they'd walk.
Well, this is one of the greatest red herrings of all, isn't it? There's a war on motorists, and the enemies are cyclists and pedestrians. You've got to pick a side. Pretty much every pedestrian and cyclist is going to be a motorist at some point as well. It's a completely ludicrous dichotomy, isn't it?
That's it. And at the moment, I'm homeschooling my kids at the moment, so I can't afford to drive. So I've had to give the car up for a little while. I've still got the car, but I just can't afford to drive it.
Can't afford to
we're walking. Well, it's an electric car.
Can't afford to charge it. I thought it was supposed to be cheap.
It is cheap, but it's just the insurance and things like that.
Oh, okay. Yes.
But what I found is like my daughter and I walk into town, so we're just getting used to walking more. And since I've not been driving, the habit of driving, right, would normally be like, we'll go to the shop, we'll get in the car and we'll go. Whereas now, we can't. So we'll walk, So it's almost that behaviour thing, isn't it? It's almost like we're addicted.
And that's it. So you don't have the thing. Your skin is not so thin that when someone says you can't do this in your car, you're going to balk at that. So what is the difference between you and them? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Is the gun debate analogy, does that work? Is that fair? Is sovereignty is a good word to use? So the people like Mark Harper, they kind of give you the wink. They say, "Come over here. You see that fella over there? He's trying to take away your freedom of movement."
Yeah, freedom. Yeah, exactly.
No, hang on a minute. Freedom of movement's a bad thing unless you're in your car, in which case it's a good thing.
Exactly, and so I mean, because I passed my test when I was 20, it's like you get given, because I live in a rural area, and it's you've suddenly got that freedom. You can get to places, and I do want to drive again because
of course.
it is a pain.
Of course, it depends. That's why 15-minute cities are a good idea, so that you actually can get to places without having to drive. But they've got a problem with them as well. What do you want? I want the shops to be much further away from my house than they are currently. What's that? You're building a 15-minute city. The shops are going to be near my house. I'm going to be able to walk to the doctors and the shop. Down with that sort of thing. It's a war on motorists. I don't want to have shops near my house. I want shops to be 20 minutes drive away. It's madness. Jamie says the car is a cocoon. My brother will sometimes just sit in his for a while before he even starts it up to go home. It's almost like a garden shed. That's quite poignant, actually. I get that. It's a moment of what's that word I want? A moment of isolation, a place of repose. You sit in your car. It's the only place you're in charge. You get home, you've been ordered around the place, do your chores, tidy your room, eat your peas, whatever. You sit in your car and you're the god of that box. That's why people hate. So that I hate. I'm going there. The more inadequate you are outside your car, the more likely you are to believe that there's a war on motorists, because it's the only place where you feel empowered and in control. Except for freedom of movement to other countries. You're against that. You don't like that. Down with that sort of thing. But freedom of movement in your car, that's sacrosanct. Mark's in Tamworth. Mark, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. James, it's funny what you say about fear, because it's quite easy to make people scared. I was a traffic cop for the best part of 25 years. And now I've retired.
Were you ever in any of those TV programmes?
Lots, unfortunately.
I bet you. I thought you might have been. Because I don't think I've ever met a traffic cop that hasn't had his own TV show.
That's it. Yeah, it comes with the job now, unfortunately. And that's part of the thing. It's all about awareness.
Yes.
And people are very much aware that they can be caught. It's probably the only time that they will be caught breaking the law for the average person.
Yes.
Is when they're driving the car. That's it. Yeah.
Yes, it's a really good point.
There is, in effect, there has been a war on some motorists. There always has been, but it's the incompetent group of motorists. There's a small group of motorists that daily cause danger for the rest of their communities. And there has been, for very good reasons, an ongoing war against that small group of motorists, because they cause a huge amount of damage to their communities.
Oh, I mean,
it costs the UK $40 billion a year just in RTCs alone, the overall effect of the economy. And so it's a real big issue. But what they effectively do is because people are aware that it goes on and everybody drives and everybody knows that they can't quite drive perfectly. Nobody can. There's no such thing as 100% perfect drive. There's too much going on now on the roads.
Of course.
There's too many variables. Everybody makes a mistake. We'll all creep over at a speed limit every now and then. We'll all take a turning we shouldn't turn and bits and pieces like that. It's very easy to make people scared and associate with that problem group, and nobody likes associating with a problem group. And what most people, sensible people, realise is, well, actually, I'm quite good. I've driven around for all these years. I've only got one fine all these years because everybody's made that one mistake and gone on a speed awareness course or got for a fixed penalty. But then they introduce that fear element that they're going to come after you now. Even though you're doing nothing wrong, they're going to come after you.
It's psychologically quite clever. Well, I mean, it depends how many people fall for it. But you're right. That idea that I'm painting a target on your back and telling you that they're coming for you, and that's the whole war on motorist rhetoric, isn't it?
It is, and it does. I mean, it does work. Because I was using it for years in the way that I did my behaviour change when I policed. Is that you put people in a problem group and said, "Well, we're coming after you for this reason."
Yes.
And that fear element. Fear is the biggest, most effective way of changing somebody's behaviour. As you rightly associated with Brexit, you make people scared of something, and then they'd do something, they'd vote for something that
against their own interest, but they think in the short term they're protecting themselves from this threat that has been described.
Exactly.
To them.
exactly the same thing you have with 20-mile-an-hour limits, with low traffic neighbourhoods, all these things that will effectively and holistically improve their lifestyle, their kids' lifestyle and their communities. Because the fear element, it just introduces that whole doubt into their mind and make them do something that will, in fact, long-term work against them.
The politics of it is mad, isn't it? Because the government are the ones that have launched this. You could almost understand how it might work in opposition, and you could be blaming the government for doing it, but they're trying to sort of national government trying to turn citizens against local government, aren't they, really? So just sort of claiming that the councils are ruining your life and I'm Prime Minister, I'm going to protect you from the war on motorists. But as you say, the only motorists who've got anything to fear from traffic cops or the law are the motorists who are breaking the law or driving dangerous. This is a fascinating phone-in. I can't actually believe it. Mark's just tuned in, says, I thought I tuned into the wrong station. I seem to be listening to a motoring phone-in. Well, you're kind of listening more to a psychology phone-in, I think. And Mark has just touched on a couple of things there that we were just flirting with earlier. The car is a mobile cave, one texter has just said. And so that is how you get these people. Most people, I think, when they're in their car, are using it as a means to an end. Literally as a means to an end. It's an A to B. It's a vehicle. It is about conveying yourself and your family or your goods from one place to another. It is not an extension of your personality or a substitute for something that's missing in your life. But the more of a substitute it is, the more of an extension of your personality your car has been allowed to become, the more susceptible perhaps you are to some Herbert popping up and claiming that they're trying to wage a war on you. And that's the thing about Brexit. That's why Mark mentioned it. It's why I mentioned it. If I walk into a room and there are 100 people in that room and I shout, "Lion! There's a lion coming!" and 52 people run for the hills. They peg it out of the room. Some of them might even trample each other. They could get hurt on the way out of the room. And 48 people stay sitting in that room and then realise there's no lion. I think we made a mistake in 2016 by calling the 52 people who ran for the door stupid, because there might have been a lion. Now, admittedly, they could have checked and then they wouldn't have run for the hills and they'd have carried on watching the show. But they didn't. If there had been a lion, the 48 people would have got eaten. So when someone says, "War on motorists," and a motorist goes, "Oh, rah, down with them," God, you can see that it's like a visceral reflex reaction to a described and therefore perceived threat. And yet it's all nonsense. So that's the tragedy for the Tories, is they bet their house on something they knew to be nonsense. Everybody watching Uxbridge and Ruislip knew it was nonsense. They knew that the popularity or unpopularity of ULEZ was going to depend upon how many people were actually susceptible to paying for it when the legislation actually came in. Scaring people who weren't going to have to pay for it by telling them that they were going to have to pay for it was very, very short-term effective. But they end up voting against their own interests. Crazy. Gosh. So I think it's a psychology and a political phone-in, not a motoring phone-in, because I don't really like motoring phone-ins.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
10:53 is the time. My apologies to the good burghers of Uxbridge. My friend has been in touch to say we're not that thick. Well, actually, he said we're thick, but we're not that thick. You've remembered it wrong. They didn't vote for the Tories because they thought they'd personally have to pay the charge. They voted for the Tories because the Tories promised they'd scrap the whole scheme, and everyone knew someone who thought they'd be affected. We're not idiots, mate. Right, Scott. I take your point, but that was the lion. The lion was the idea that they were going to somehow stop it, even though everybody knew that they couldn't. So you voted for something that was impossible, possibly not against your own interests. Speaking of lions, David has been in touch with quite an important point. David says it's unlikely that one lion would be able to eat 48 people, James. Even a very greedy lion would struggle at that. I take your point. I mean, the analogy needs some work. 100 people in a room watching a film. Bloke appears at the doorway, shouts lion. 52 people run for the hills. But there is no lion. So the 48 people get to enjoy the rest of the film in peace without the 52. But if there was a lion, they'd get eaten. So you can't call the people that ran for the hills stupid. They're only stupid after it has been proved that there was no lion, and they insist that they weren't running away from the lion. They were running away from something else, invisible and unspecified, and they definitely didn't make a mistake by running away from that thing, or running towards sovereignty, perhaps. 10:54 is the time. Jamie and Ned are up next, and I'm going to warn you both. This is by far the best motoring phone-in that I've ever heard on British radio, and if either of you two mess it up in the home straight, we're going to be having words. So no pressure, Jamie, in Canterbury. What would you like to say?
Hi there. I wanted to say that it doesn't seem to be a motoring problem. It seems to be just another attack on the population.
What's an attack?
Well, it seems that it's what we hear is more rules every day.
But rules aren't an attack, are they? I mean, things like not being able to drink a bottle of whiskey before you drive a car isn't an attack. It's a fairly good rule.
Well, for sure, they are. Those are good rules. But
so, which rules are attacks?
Well, it feels that, for instance, that we're under more and more pressure.
Yeah, I know, but I'm asking for examples.
For examples, the clean air zones with small businesses already under incredible pressure. They don't have a problem with the clean air zone, but it's just another expense.
So who's getting attacked then there?
It's another restriction.
So who's getting attacked?
Well, it would be the small businesses that are getting attacked there.
Which what? By what? Because they have to drive cleaner vehicles.
They have to drive cleaner vehicles, but it's not the fact they have to drive cleaner vehicles. It's the fact that they have to find the funding for new vehicles. They have to find the sort of the time to put into it. But
you don't know anyone in that category.
I don't personally know them, but it's listening to your show and other shows.
Well, it's definitely not listening to my show. So you've now got a theoretical victim of an attack that you have no personal experience of whatsoever, but you feel strongly enough to ring a radio station.
Well, I feel strongly enough to ring because
I know you're here. I can hear you.
Yes, of course. But it feels that sort of every day we get up, there are lots of things that we would like fixing. Like we'd like the hospitals fixing. We'd like sort of GP appointments fixing. We'd like immigration fixed. We'd like more council.
There it is. That didn't take long.
But all of these things, we'd like potholes fixed.
Yes.
All of these things that we'd like to be fixed, and that we're told.
Well, some of us would like dirty air to be fixed.
Well, we would indeed, but in a way.
Well, no, because when they try and do that, it's an attack.
It feels like it. It feels like there's all these promises.
But it can only feel like an attack if you're being attacked, and you're not being attacked.
But it feels like
you've just had to invent some business people that you've never met to prove that there is an attack underway because you're not personally being attacked. You just feel like you're being attacked, which might be a you problem.
Well, not necessarily a me problem.
Well, I don't feel attacked. I don't feel attacked.
But I mean, I have a business, and we have so many rules, so many regulations about shipping into Europe that it's now become impossible. Shipping worldwide.
Well, that's because of Brexit.
Small business. Sorry?
That's largely because of Brexit. We've made it much harder to ship into Europe, but people voted for that.
We did.
Yeah.
And
did you?
And we have a government that promised they're going to help us with all of these
Did you
things.
vote for it?
Did I vote for it? No, I didn't. No. But No, I didn't vote for it.
Okay.
No, because
the kind of people that voted for it are generally, Jamie, the kind of people who insist that they're under attack without being able to describe any of the ways in which they are actually under attack. They, in my experience, they are the kind of people that voted for Brexit.
Well, possibly, but I didn't. But I mean, what it seems like, trying to put it into a short point, is that it feels that there are so many things that we are more and more responsible for. We are being,
but we can't name any. We can't name any, apart from the rules that have come in as a consequence of Brexit.
Well, there's the rules that have come into the consequence of Brexit.
So you personally, Jamie in Canterbury, the best example of you being under attack as a motorist is.
Well, the best example is that I can't drive my vehicle into London because of the extra costs. And as I mentioned, it's
you
not
can drive your vehicle into London. You just have to pay the costs.
But it doesn't seem a war on motorists. It seems a war on the people, the wider social context.
Okay. And the proof is the congestion charge.
Well, not necessarily that, but it's everything. It's nothing.
Well, it's not. You keep saying it's everything. I don't feel under attack. Maybe you should just be more like me.
Well, we do feel under attack. We feel that nothing is being resolved. Nothing is being fixed.
Who's we?
Every time we step out of the door, there's more and more.
Well, I feel for you, man. I really feel for you. Every time you step out of the door, you feel you're under attack from more and more regulations. Except, obviously, the one you've mentioned is one that isn't outside your door. You'd have to drive all the way to London to be affected by that regulation. So when you step outside your door, what's the regulation that hits you first?
There isn't one particular.
Well, just name 5 then.
It's
go on.
Higher taxes.
Yeah.
Higher car insurance.
Yeah.
more restrictions on where we can park.
Yeah.
More restrictions on trying to use retail areas.
Okay.
More restrictions on trying to visit a hospital.
How are there restrictions on trying to visit a hospital?
Sorry?
How are there restrictions on trying to visit a hospital?
What, motoring restrictions?
Oh, we're back to motoring now.
Well, no, I'm just saying if you're bringing it back to motoring, so it's more difficult to visit people there.
Okay.
If you've got a problem, it's more difficult to visit there yourself because you can't park anywhere near it.
Okay. Well, you can, though. You can do all of these things, and nothing's changed. None of the things you're describing are new developments. But I feel for you. And I know it sounds like I don't, but I really do. It must be awful to feel under attack in the way that you describe. I just don't feel it. And I don't understand what the difference is between us. Except perhaps, I don't know, really. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. And in a sense, that is a helpful reminder of where motoring phone-ins normally go. This sort of unspecified or difficult to pin down grievance that other people feed, and I try to cure. But in your case, I failed, and I apologise for that. I'd like you to have said goodbye at the end of this call feeling less attacked and less aggrieved and less persecuted and less besieged by rules and regulations. But I sense I failed, which means I'll have to try again on another occasion. It's 11:01.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 5 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We turn our attention next, just in case there's anyone left who I haven't annoyed, we turn our attention next to one of my all-time favourite subjects. And it is a subject upon which I have very strong views, which are incredibly, well, in a sense, they are quite hypocritical. Have you worked out what it is yet? Can you tell what it is yet? I noticed that the Secretary of State for Education has taken a day off from threatening to punch Ofsted inspectors or complain about the fact that people don't congratulate her enough for doing a brilliant job. Those are Gillian Keegan's greatest hits, I believe, aren't they? Saying that she would punch Ofsted inspectors if they were rude to her and complaining that people don't praise her enough for doing a brilliant job. She's taken a day off from her hobbies and has instead accused Labour of not understanding private schools. Indeed, it was an interview, I believe, with our very own, Natasha Clark, in which she said it's a really ill-thought-through policy. They don't really understand. They think of larger schools like Eton and places like that. The policy to which she objects is Sir Keir Starmer's intention to remove a VAT exemption for private schools. As at the moment, if you are buying your dinner, you have to pay VAT. But if you are paying to send your child to a private school, you don't have to pay VAT on that bill. I want to do this in a slightly different way from how we've done it in the past, but I need to get my usual gubbins out of the way first. It is objectively hilarious that people who are in the business of denying poverty, if you're talking about the necessity of food banks, for example, or you're talking about people who run out of money before they run out of month and actually can't afford things like toothbrushes or toothpaste. Hygiene poverty is a real thing. The Observer reported on Sunday of children whose teachers at schools are having to wash their clothes or stick them in the shower twice a week. Families in this country at this point in history who have got nothing, who reach the end of the rope long before they reach the end of the month. And people who deny that problem exists, people who malign individuals who find themselves in that sort of trouble, people who insist that poverty is somehow a lifestyle choice, people who make great capital in newspaper columns in the House of Commons, claiming that anybody who is vulnerable, anybody who is in need, anybody who is poverty-stricken is there through their own fault. And all they have to do is get a better job, or perhaps use the value range in their local supermarket. They can even perhaps cook a meal for 30p if they simply get the right lesson. So all of those people who are, I think, dismissive to the point of cruelty when it comes to poverty and financial vulnerability, when it comes to VAT on school fees, they suddenly become crusaders. They become charity. Won't somebody think of the private school parents? The idea that not being able to afford to feed your family makes you a liar, but not being able to afford to pay VAT on your school fees makes you a victim is the most perfect example of how bent much of our commentariat is. Poor people over there, Screw them. Wealthy people over there are going to find a few more quid if they want to keep their child in private school. Won't somebody think of that? Won't somebody speak for them? Pass me my violin. I've got a sonata brewing. And it is extraordinary. For the record, my parents were very much in that category of people who scrimped and saved to send me to expensive schools. But the fact that they could scrimp and save enough to send me to an expensive school puts them in a privileged position, even if they didn't feel it particularly, even if among our peer group we were far from the wealthiest family, even if at school, when it came to how much money was left over at the end of the month in my family, there wouldn't have been much because they'd spent so much on school fees, and I was at school with people who had moats around their house. So that I understand the hierarchy. And I would also add to the conversation, my dad worked very hard, because he did. But so do coal miners, and they can't dream of sending their children to a school like mine. I mean, we don't really have many coal miners. Did you know that Christopher Dean's dad was a coal miner out of Torvill and Dean? I didn't know that. I interviewed him yesterday for full disclosure. I interviewed both of them. So it's a groundbreaking full disclosure, because it's the first time I've ever interviewed two people at the same time. So people think I don't work hard. That means I work twice as hard on this week's full disclosure as I usually do, because I had two people in the room for an hour as opposed to just one. So the question now, the political question about private schools is about fairness. Okay, I don't want to have a conversation about how hard you work and how unfair it is. I feel for you. And when I say to you, if you really, really think you're not going to be able to afford school fees after the VAT exemption is abolished, then you need to get a better job or cancel your Netflix subscription or eat fewer avocados. I'm joking, and I have my tongue in my cheek. Because it's the unfairness of this practice that intrigues me the most. Those of us that pay to send our children to private school do so because it's unfair. We are buying an unfair advantage for our children. I don't quite understand the psychological necessity of denying that. For people to pretend that they're not aware that that is what they're doing, for people to deny that that is what we're doing. That is why we are doing it. My late father's motivation was particularly poetic, because he ended up in a profession where people who went to public school in particular enjoyed obvious advantages over people who didn't. The notion of the old school tie was very, very prevalent in Fleet Street in general, but the Daily Telegraph in particular, where he spent most of his career. And so when he had the opportunity to send me to the sort of school that some of his colleagues had gone to, he took it. He knew exactly what he was doing. I used to even describe it as a golden ticket. He was buying me a golden ticket, like Charlie Buckets, except it was worth more than just chocolate. And some of us do the same. And we do it because we know it's unfair. So I think the only morally honest position with regard to private education is that if you can afford it, you should do it, but you should also be in favour of its abolition at the same time. So there's no earthly way I'm going to let Muggins over there buy an advantage for his children that I am denying to mine. I want my children to have every advantage money can buy. For me, that's part and parcel of being a parent. But there are some advantages that shouldn't be for sale, and that would include education. So what I like about Starmer's policy is that it ideally will shrink the pool of people who are getting that unfair advantage. So if you're not going to get rid of it altogether, then the best thing you can do is have fewer people availing themselves of the unfair advantage. Here is an unfair advantage. It becomes more unfair according to how many people have it. It ceases to be an unfair advantage when everybody has it. If everybody has equal access to something, it's not an advantage and it's not unfair. I don't think you can achieve that. I don't think you're ever going to be able to do that. And even if you abolish private education, some people would be paying for their children to have private tuition in the evenings or at weekends, so they would be buying an unfair advantage. But what I want you to try to... Actually, Charlie's ticket got him the whole factory, didn't it? I apologise. It wasn't just chocolate. I thank you to Karen and Jane and others for pointing that out. I want to examine the unfairness of it, if I can. That's all. I want to do this as if we were foreign, because it's such a baked-in part of British society. If you were listening yesterday, we had a fascinating phone-in about the psychological damage that these schools can do to people, but partly as a consequence of Princess Diana, the late Diana, Princess of Wales' brother Charles, talking about his experiences, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and it was a very powerful, very, very poignant phone-in. So I'm not under any illusions about the negatives as opposed to the positives, but the reason why these institutions exist is to entrench inequality and to entrench unfairness. It's all very well for me to sit here and talk about having gone to one and wanting to buy it for my children because we don't come from wealth. You know, my dad didn't even go to university, left school at 15, grew up above a pub in Leeds. So I can give you that slightly hackneyed backstory as a justification for trying to keep up with the toffs or catch up with the toffs. But it's still unfair because you leave 90% of the country behind you. So what I really want to do, if you can help with this, what I really want to do is describe what the unfairness looks like from the outside, okay? From the outside, because I don't know. I'm going to tell you something I've never told you before. It doesn't keep me awake at night, but I do wonder about it a lot. If you hadn't had the education I had, and I mean the class side of it more necessarily than the exam result side of it. If I hadn't had my entry into that world, if Mum and Dad hadn't bought me that golden ticket, where would I be now? I don't know. I love my job. I mean, I really, really love my job. You can probably tell most days. And, you know, I'm incredibly blessed in so many ways. And I'd love to think that it was down to talent, right? I'd love to think that even if I'd gone to what the Tories used to call a bog standard comprehensive school, somehow my great talent would have emerged and flooded. I'd love to believe that. But the thing I've never really told you before is that I don't. I wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had the I don't even want to say confidence, because it wasn't confidence. It was an ability to hide anxiety. It was an ability to hide the fact that you were nervous or you had imposter syndrome or you felt inadequate. The swagger is learned behavior. Walk into a room, people think I'm arrogant. On the inside, I'm weeping with nerves and anxiety. But on the outside, I look like the real deal. Not now. I'm a different person now, but in my 20s, it's when I got onto newspapers, I'd be physically sick at the thought of having to walk around a room and speak to all the famous people in it in the hope of getting a story. I'm not exaggerating. Physically sick in the bathroom, in the toilet. Physically sick. I used to carry a toothbrush with me in my briefcase, and then I'd scrub myself up, go back out, gird my loins, and do it. And that was swagger that I'd learnt at school. It's not healthy necessarily, but that belief that your talent is... I mean, have a look around now. Let's just pick a few people, right? Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Rishi Sunak. If you went to a normal comprehensive school, if those kids had been at your school, would they have ended up Prime Minister? Secretary of State for Business? Would they? No. So how come they did? How come they ended up Prime Minister? How come David Cameron ended up Prime Minister? How come 20 people from the same school have ended up Prime Minister? It cannot be the case that the school somehow attracts epic talent, that the school creates gifts that lend themselves to public life or politics or wealth. It doesn't. The level of unfairness here is absolutely extraordinary. But because it is baked into our society and has been for a couple of 100 years, we very rarely take time to properly point it out. And do you know what part of the problem here is? Me. Because how many people who conduct these conversations, whether in television studios or on the radio or anywhere else, in how many people who conduct these conversations have had the education, have had the private education? Massive majority of us, hugely overrepresented in all major professions. High court judges, I think, are among the worst. But massively over. So almost always, the conversation about private education is going to be conducted by a disproportionate number of privately educated people. You know? So even now, this conversation is biased. Even now, somewhere inside, I'm justifying what might appear to you to be hypocrisy. Even now, there's a little bit of me that thinks, yeah, you'd still be Billy Big Bananas on LBC if you'd not gone to public school. You'd still, yeah, of course you would. But I wouldn't. Deep down, you wouldn't. So what I want to know is what it looks like from the outside. The injustice and the unfairness of private education. Explain it to somebody from, I don't know, Peru. That's what I want to hear, what it looks like from the outside. I don't want to have the old conversation about how hard you work and how your children deserve it and, you're not rich at all and you go without holidays. I know all that. That's where I come from. That's my background. I want to know what it looks like from the outside. I want to have a conversation about private education without speaking to any privately educated people, because we've never done that before. And why have we never done that before? Because I'm biased. Because I conduct the conversation in the context of my own existence. I don't want to. I want to conduct it in yours or Keir Starmer's. How does it look from the outside? 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need. I'm in favour of the policy because it reduces the number of people getting the unfair advantage, but I'm one of them. I can afford it. So this is, hypocrisy 2.0 in some ways, but it's actually a morally defensible position. The only morally defensible position for private education is that you will pay whatever you can to improve your children's life chances, while also being in favour of the removal of unfair advantages, even if you are able to afford them yourself. I mean, it must drive you potty if you can't afford it or you're worried about being able to pay your VAT to hear me explain it so clearly. But this conversation isn't about you or about me. This conversation is about you. What does private education look like to people who haven't had it and can't afford it? I.e., 90-odd% of people listening to this programme now. So every other conversation about private education we've ever had has excluded 90-odd% of the audience. Every conversation you ever hear on any radio station about private education is conducted almost exclusively by the parents of privately educated children or the beneficiaries of a private education. Which means you never hear, I never hear, the conversation about how unfair it is. Let's have it now. It's 11:20.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11. Excuse me, more. Dominic writes, my uncle went to a private school and my mum did not. In turn, his son went to a private school. In just 2 generations, the wealth gap between the families of my cousin and myself has widened into a chasm that can never be breached. The C makes the point. So she says, thank you for approaching this subject in this way instead of the obvious. I'm sick of hearing that this policy is an attack on aspiration, as if every single person who can't even dream of affording to send their children to private schools has no aspiration for their children. It's another really obnoxious element, isn't it, of this discourse. You're absolutely right. All children deserve the best education and access to opportunities, not just those who can afford to purchase it. I'm not against private education per se. I just don't think that choice should be about quality of education or access to opportunities. Tanya says it's a seal of approval and a sense of entitlement coupled with supreme self-belief that will never be there for most state school kids. And that's a bit of a realisation for me that we've talked about this subject in various different ways 100 times, but we've always done it from my end of the telescope, never from yours. I'd like to fix that today. 0345 60 60973 is the number you need. If you can describe Gary, my mate Gary has sent me a message saying it's like, to carry on with the chocolate analogy, it's like having your face pressed up to the sweet shop window. If you're in the sweet shop, it's all you've ever known. So what's it like to be on the outside looking in? Toby's in Bury St Edmunds. Toby, what would you like to say?
I'd say that I work for state schools, the clerk of governing bodies. So I get to see the underbelly of what's happening in schools on a weekly basis that are either trust or maintained schools. And I see that we're in the budget time of the year and every school is struggling. I know schools where they don't have caretakers and the staff do the caretaking of the school, where there's cuts to staff, enrichment activities are being cut and they're all struggling. And I also I do a part-time job as a youth football coach in the grounds of a private school. And that private school has got 2 hockey 3G facilities, a swimming pool, a gymnasium, loads of grounds, and they're just 2 worlds apart.
And what does that do to us? What does that do to us? For the two Tobys, one in one world, one in the other world. What difference does it make moving forward, do we think?
Well, I think that it just shows the inequality.
No, I know that, but what difference does it make to us? Because I went to a school like the one you described. My school, you're not going to believe this, had a beagle pack. A pack of beagles, mate. A pack of beagles. You could go beagling on Saturdays if you wanted with the school beagles. We had an 18-hole golf course, more tennis courts than Wimbledon. What does it do? What does it? How do we change? Who would we be if we hadn't had those ridiculous advantages?
Well, I think is if there weren't private schools for rich people and they had to send their kids to the same schools as us, our schools would be better.
This is a crucial point, isn't it? This is a crucial point. Helen makes this point. She says, what you need to understand is that people who send their children to private schools not only give their children an unfair advantage, but they suck resources from the state sector as well, conferring more disadvantage on people in the state sector because we need middle-class parents like you in the state sector agitating for improvement. It's a bit like private healthcare in that way. Yes. So it is baked in though, and as I say, if you're at a school with lots of tennis courts and a pack of beagles and a private gymnasium and a swimming pool, you don't know that you're not. You don't know what you've not got, if you see what I mean. So that epic inequality not only gets baked in, it feels completely normal. That's the mad thing about this. Thank you, Toby. Anne-Marie's in Sheffield. Anne-Marie, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about my experience when my daughter went to Leeds University.
Oh, yes.
She went to a brilliant comprehensive in Sheffield, lots of bright friends. Sheffield doesn't have a lot of private schools. And she went up to Leeds University, which you think, well, standard Northern University. And she was absolutely gobsmacked by how many private school kids there were in her halls of residence. And then when I met them, I worked in education for many years, so I worked around young people. I think it's this supreme self-confidence that you notice. It's the belief and the entitlement, and it's not entitlement in a horrible, grasping way.
No.
It's just like an inner entitlement that nothing will go wrong for them.
Which isn't true. I mean, yesterday's show...
that may be a facade, but they do it very well. And there's a funny story that one of the first socials my daughter went, and she was just, thought, there'll be loads of kids like me here. Yeah. And somebody came up to her and said, oh, where did you go? And it's like a coded language.
Yeah, I speak
And
that
my
language.
daughter just said, well, you won't have heard of it. It's just a comprehensive in Sheffield.
Yeah.
And it's that coded language and hidden code that if you've not been in the system, you don't access.
And what does it deny you access to later?
I think it's, contacts for a start.
Yeah.
Because all the people who succeed tend to have gone to private schools and then go on to Oxbridge, etc. So you have this ready-made set of contacts. And I just think it is this self-belief. It is this thing that this is what I'm destined to do because I'm successful. And you can say that you're going to be Prime Minister when you grow up, or you're going to... my daughters, even though, for her friends went to do medicine, went to Oxbridge,
yes,
there's always that little bit of self-doubt, that's not for people like me, even though we're from a middle-class background, so it's nothing to do with class.
But oddly, your daughter's from pretty much the same background as me. My mum's from Sheffield, my dad's from Leeds, and yet, because I went to the school I went to, which was also in Yorkshire, funnily enough, I would be the kind of person that you've just described. Even if inside I was feeling unconfident, on the outside I'd have looked to the manner born. I'd have looked very much to the,
But these people are all lovely. I'm not saying anything about people personally.
That's coming across. You're not sounding chippy or unkind. It is just because that's the point I'm trying to make, is that you don't know that what you've got is extraordinary, because for you it's ordinary, it's normal.
And they're no brighter. My daughters have very bright friends who got to Cambridge from a comprehensive. So it's not about intelligence. It's about belief and this idea that I will always be okay because I've got an incredible network behind me and look what I've been able to have so far.
And it doesn't even need to translate into wealth. I mean,
a lot to do with wealth.
Wealth helps, I suppose, but it's not.
Without wealth, you wouldn't be at private school to a certain extent. But
but some people, it is, isn't it? And that's beautifully described. It really is, and it's so normal, and yet so abnormal. It's like one of those things that the more perspective you get on it, the crazier it sounds. So what you've got is inequality in a society which is established already. And then you've got a system under which the people who benefit most from the inequality, i.e. the most advantaged people, can then go the distance. I can literally then pay to engender, to enshrine that inequality, to dig it deeper into society for the next generation and the generation after that. 32 minutes after 11. Listen, I don't know whether this is a reflection of what Anne-Marie said, but this is not a phone-in for people who send their children to private school or people who went to private school. I don't know whether we're demonstrating our entire... The only person allowed to contribute to this phone-in who went to private school is me. Everybody else, the 90-odd% of the population, are normally squeezed out of these conversations. Not today. Today I want to know what it looks like from the outside. Thomas Watts has the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
Phil's in Brittany, and he makes a good point, and this is a fly in the ointment of Sir Keir Starmer's policy on VAT on school fees. The only downside I can see of introducing VAT on private school fees is that the super rich will barely notice, James. The moderately wealthy might be deterred from sending Tarquin and Felicia to some hallowed halls, but Viscount Ponsonby of St. Petersburg will still be there, thus concentrating the advantage even more in the hands of a perceived elite. That's where I started on this, actually. That's where I started. I used to think the exact opposite of what I think now. I used to think the best thing to do would be to extend it to 20% of the population, to have the kind of private schools where the fees aren't that high, but the education is better than you'd get in other local schools. But then you're not buying the swagger. You're not buying the golden ticket. The advantage depends upon the rarefied status that it bestows. So by making it more rarefied, Phil's right, you concentrate the advantage and the privilege, but society as a whole benefits. You've got fewer people enjoying the unfair advantage. Society as a whole benefits. Best case scenario, wipe the advantage out completely. If you can't do that, confine it to as few people as possible. And that makes the world a fairer place. 38 after 11 is the time. David's in Birmingham. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Yeah, I've got the perspective I've got is I went to both a comprehensive and an independent school.
Right.
So I did about a year older than you. I'm 53.
Okay. Yeah.
So I did my O-levels because I'm that old.
Same.
At the same comprehensive that actually David Hare went to. So Washwood Heath in Birmingham.
Okay.
And then did my A-levels at King Edward's School, the one in Edgbaston, which is obviously a pretty high-achieving independent school, and got a fistful of A-levels. And the difference, chalk and cheese.
Yeah, talk me through it. Because, I mean, there's a hierarchy here even. So King Edward's is a fee-paying old grammar school, isn't it? It
is, yeah.
And it gets routinely, when we were young, it would get some of the best A-level results in the whole country.
Still
I think, but does it still? So what does it bestow? Because then you go. I mean, it's not Eton or even Malvern College just up the road, but it's still way ahead of the school that you came from. So what are the differences? What does it bestow upon you that you wouldn't get elsewhere?
Well, I mean, things might have changed since the 80s, but I don't think they've changed that much. When I was at comprehensive, I was in a class of about 32, 33 people, one textbook between 2 or 3 pupils.
Yeah.
We still had playing fields, but, nothing really to write home about. I think those have all gone. As soon as you turn up to King Edward's, you're given 2 sets of every textbook that you're going to need, one to keep in class and one to take home with you.
Wow.
Obviously the swimming pools, the sports facilities, the library, the cultural stuff. I played cello in the. I did try and ring in last week for the music thing.
Well,
as well.
Gary's just knitted those two together. He says you have to consider this in conjunction with what Starmer said last week about the arts.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough to be of an age where I started playing cello when I was 7.
Right.
And I played in the school orchestra that played we were all sort of grades 1 to 5 basically.
Yeah.
As soon as you go to King Edward's, they've got a concert orchestra that's grade 8.
And that makes you walk differently. It makes you feel different inside.
I got to sing in the cathedral. It's because I was in the choirs. As you said before, the school plays were ridiculous.
And that adds that's the intangibles, isn't it? Because I mean,
of course it is. Yeah.
We've got the exam results.
You get all the contacts. I had, my sister. At O level, we had very, very similar results. She stayed on at Washwood and didn't do so well. Ended up going to Birmingham Poly, as was then. It's now BCU. got some good qualifications. She's been a success.
Sure.
But, compared to what I got, even when I make them, even when things go wrong, I get out of them. It's just that, as you say, it's the swagger, it's the confidence that you get.
And that is what they paid for. That's what your mum and dad paid for. They knew what they were doing. And in some ways, I can make the case for it being mad not to do it. I do make that case. If it's there and you can afford it, you'd be crazy not to do it. But please, spare me the lectures on how it's not unfair, or it's a consequence of working hard, or it's all about aspiration. Because, David's own family, his sister deserved all the opportunities that he had, but he got them and she didn't. So, in the microcosm of a single family unit, you can see the inequality writ large. And I guess you just never know, do you, who you would be? It's that Robert Frost poem, isn't it? Is it two roads diverged in a wood and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. In the context of private education, that's actually literally true. You took the one less travelled by. If you'd gone down the path that 90-odd% of the population went down, where would you have ended up? You'll never know. Andy's in Chorley. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. Honour and a privilege to be on with you for the first time ever.
Well, privilege is mine, Andy. What's on your mind?
It's the one subject I've probably ever disagree with you on, in terms of your choice or your belief that if you've got the facility or the ability, you should send your kids to private school.
Well, I have to say that. My dad would come back and haunt me. My dad would come back and haunt me if I didn't.
It's funny enough, because I'm going to talk about my dad a little bit now as quickly as I can, because basically, incredibly clever, educated, gifted man, won a scholarship to Oxford, did classics, the cleverest man in the West Riding of the York Tribute generation, because he was the man who won the scholarship.
Wow.
Had 5 kids. We're Catholic, which is the bad side, obviously. And all of us reasonably academic. I'm the bum of the family, if I'm completely honest with you. Sister turned down Oxford to go to Edinburgh School of Medicine because it's better for medicine. Most of his disgust, I might add. And I guess the thing is, in terms of what surprises me, is I get that thing about the door opening bit. I do understand that to an extent.
Yes.
But as I said to your colleague, for me, a 0.1% chance of your child contracting mogitis or borositis, I can't take that risk. I just can't take it out. I know you and Mrs. O'Brien will be carrying out thorough anti-mogitis disinfection procedures on a daily basis. I know that. But still.
There is, I mean, do you know, sometimes, it's funny you say that, because you could watch the kids change at my school. And if they turned up with a northern accent, for example, it would get more or less beaten out of them. And by the end, they would be some of the worst examples of what... The people who were sort of faking it ended up being the worst examples of what you're describing.
Would be. I think, for my dad, he's a Bradford lad. Linguist, classics, the lot. And don't worry, he gave us everything. As I say, I'm the idiot. I'm the one who didn't take advantage of those things.
Okay.
I see all my brothers and sisters, my sister who's a doctor.
And they all went to state schools. They didn't need private education to scale.
They went to grammar schools, but they were state grammar schools.
Yeah. Well, that's a different form of elitism, of course.
Selective education, obviously.
There's an inequality at 11 there that kicks in according to how good you are at exams.
And he did take that, but mainly, to be honest with you, not for the academic bit, for the Catholic bit, if I'm completely honest with you.
Yeah, sure.
Because he was a mad, crazy Catholic.
God bless him.
God bless him. Now,
but it's baked in.
Us everything in terms of culture,
yes.
travel. Sister's a grade 8 pianist and violinist, as well as doing medicine age 17.
Gosh.
I mean, it's off the scale. But what I think really not disappoints me is you'll eulogise about your colleagues like Sangeeta Meister or Carol Vorderman or David Lammy.
Yeah.
No private school in sight, mate.
No, I know.
Be done.
Oh, yeah, but you can't give me... This is me being modest for once.
Yeah.
This is me genuinely thinking I'm not as talented as they are. I wouldn't be who I am, or I wouldn't have what I have now if I hadn't been taught that. We'd call it swagger, call it chutzpah, call it confidence, or just self-belief. I would say to teachers when I was 18 that I was going to be the editor of a newspaper when I grew up, or a senior politician. No one would laugh at me. I suspect it was the same for you at home. And indeed at grammar school, but for the majority of the population, you'd be laughed out of town if you came out with that. You really would. Thank you, Andy. I mean, I kind of come at it from that very simple, selfish equation of it's there, and I can reach it, and I can pick it off the shelf and give it to my kids. If I couldn't reach it, I might have a different view on people who can, but I'm not. I'm me, and that's where I am. And I really admire the people who can reach it and choose not to take it. And in some ways, they're probably better people than me as well, in some moral dimension. But I'm always honest, and I'm grateful to you for being honest with me as well. It's 11:46.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 9 minutes to 12. It's a bit weird, this, actually. The realisation halfway through my introduction at the top of this hour that every conversation we've ever had about this subject has been completely dominated by the tiny minority of people who benefit from precisely the disadvantage, I beg your pardon, precisely the advantage that we're talking about. First time I've ever done a phone-in. I suppose the lad in Birmingham broke it a bit because he did his sixth form at private school. But what does private education look like from the outside? All we ever really hear is sort of poor me stories about parents who work incredibly hard, or politicians who say it's a war on aspiration, or Gillian Keegan telling Natasha Clark that Labour doesn't really understand private schools. What if it's the other way around, Gillian Keegan? What if it's your Tory colleagues who've actually got no idea what the education system is like for 90% of the population? Surely that's going to be a much bigger problem than the one you describe. 11:51 is the time. Steve's in Grays. Steve, what would you like to say?
A first-time caller, James. Good morning.
Welcome, Steve.
It's a call regarding, it's not so much, well, it is the privilege, but it's also the resources in state schools. I'll give you an example. My daughter, lucky for us, we're so proud of her, has, no, she's got a offer from a med school in the Midlands, a big university.
Congratulations.
Anyway, but to study medicine, you need an A's in chemistry and biology and another subject.
Absolutely.
Right. Just prior to half term in November, unfortunately, her biology teacher had a heart attack.
Oh, God.
He's fine.
Okay.
He's fine. But now they have no biology teacher. So now that puts pressure on her. They're self-studying as much as they can. The school's quite a good school, and they've got other science teachers in there, but no specific A-level biology teacher. Now, I cannot, in the life of me, see that happening at a private school.
No, you're right.
And it's those little things.
That's quite a big thing, really.
Well, it's quite a big thing for her. She's obviously worried about it, and we're
could have. I mean, the potential impact, I'm sure, and I cross everything for her, but the potential impact of it is, I mean, not to be hyperbolic about it, it's a potentially lifelong impact that you could be describing here, isn't it?
Oh yeah, well, and so the potential of a state school student is there because Birmingham has seen it. She's passed the it's a long drawn out thing, the UCAS test and the interviews and stuff like that, and so they've seen the potential in her, and now what she needs to get is her grades. Fingers crossed, as you said, and we're wishing and doing our best that she gets them.
Yeah, but if she was at a private school, this would be one problem she didn't have. That would be and therefore the grades would be within closer reach. Well, listen, mate, I'm sure she'll be fine. I really am. But
potential better.
It's a perfect example of what we've been trying to describe, because it wouldn't cross your mind if you were doing your biology A level at a private school that there'd be someone that you're going up against for a place at medical school who hasn't had a teacher since last November, who hasn't had a...
Well, there is that. But what I will say...
Go on.
I don't know whether I can mention the university.
Oh, you can do what you want, Steve.
Oh, okay. It's Birmingham University, and they have been really good on their widening participation.
Well, that's brilliant. And these are ways of coming at the inequality from the other end, aren't they? They're, by actually trying to extend places and applications and encouraging people into places where they may not previously have gone without addressing the inequality at school level. I wish her all the very best, Steve. I really do. 11:54 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Dave is in Aboyne in Scotland. Dave, how do I pronounce that?
You just did correctly.
Is that right? It is. That's a relief. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm a 60-year-old guy. I was a working-class guy, went to normal schools in Barrow-in-Furness in Cumbria, left school at 16, served my time in the shipyard as an apprentice mechanical engineer. And my life's been great. I've had a good life. I've changed careers. I now run a small but very successful business. But
But all through my life, and by the way, I had no issue with people sending their kids to private schools, whether they come from working class backgrounds and they've done well for themselves, or whether I just don't really have an issue with it. But my point I was going to make was, it's this swagger that you talk about, and throughout my life, I mean, people would be like, "You lack self-doubt. You're full of self-doubt. I just don't believe it." But I kind of am, and it's kind of just always been there. And you have to overcome it, and you just assume
you get trained
that people,
out of that. There you go. Because
you kind of do.
What's the opposite of self-doubt? I prefer self-belief to swagger, actually, because swagger sounds physical. It's like you sort of walk in a silly way, and you spread your legs really wide on the train and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's self-belief, and whether it's justified or not, it's a superpower.
Yeah. Well, you know, a really funny example. Last year, I got involved in the local golf club. They needed some help, so I thought, I'll give you some help. Anyway, long story short, I'm now on the council at the golf club, at the Boyne Golf Club, smashing course.
Right.
And even now, you know, if the president sends me a message, Dave, what do you think about this? I'm kind of, does he mean me? Is he asking me that? You know?
Yeah, well, that's imposter syndrome. It's a form of imposter syndrome.
Amusing.
Yes, of course.
Exactly.
But you probably wouldn't have that if you'd gone to the kind of schools that we've been talking about today. That's the point, though, isn't it, Dave? It's all of these little things. It's not like, you know, I'm a member of the Garrick Club or I went to school with David Cameron. It's these little things that are being baked into generation after generation after generation, and you don't know it.
With age, it sort of starts to subside with age, and you realise that you're just being ridiculous and you're as good as the next man or woman. You know, you kind of, I think anyway, you get past it. But I think what we need to do in the state school system is try and encourage people to kind of believe in themselves, because the education you get, I mean, in my cohort at Barrow County Technical School for Boys, you know, one of the guys, Steve, a good mate of mine, Steve Price, he became the CEO of an ASX listed company. There's doctors, engineers, we spread all over the world, and we've all, you know, a lot of us anyway, have had great lives as a result of it. So we haven't necessarily been held back, but I think we could have accelerated our careers. It's taken me far too long to get the self-confidence, but we could work on that maybe.
And that is something that Nicholas Soames talked about, actually, last time he rang into the programme, but it ended very good-naturedly, and he was raving about what you've just described and praising schools in his constituency, and I had to remind him that he didn't send his own children to them. So there will always be the problem, however hard you work to raise people up. The purchase of privilege will always undermine the best efforts to equalise. All you can do is reduce the number of people enjoying it, ideally to zero, but that ain't ever going to happen anytime soon. I think that's it. I think I've got quite a lot of you still waiting to talk, but I'm looking at the clock. I don't think there's going to be time. So sorry, Fabio, Jem, Debbie, Graham, Mark and others, and Ryan. I'm going to tell you something quite interesting. We had to work quite hard in that hour. Lots and lots and lots of phone calls, but an awful lot of people completely ignoring my insistence that we confine the conversation to people who didn't go to private school. Now, I don't know if that speaks of a form of entitlement or a form of swagger or a form of self-belief, but what it reminded us of, so we had a little chat during the 11:30 news bulletin. Have you ever heard me, when we're talking about sexism or even inappropriate behaviour, talking about the hashtag #MeToo movement, and I have to say, don't phone me if you're a man. I don't want to hear your views on the sexual abuse of women if you're a man. And it's weird, you think I'm exaggerating, but the switchboard for the first 5 minutes will just fill up with men who think that their view on what is appropriate and not appropriate with regard to how women feel about being treated in a certain way, they think their view is somehow as important or more important than the women's. And it was a tiny bit like that to start with. Make of it what you will, and I'm almost certainly indulging in a little bit of pot kettle, but I thought you might be interested. Nursery costs next. This is really scary.
James O'Brien on LBC.
There's something on the horizon that we haven't quite worked out how to handle yet. Inevitably, some people will try to make party political points out of it. I think they would be wrong to do so. I think that councils facing borderline bankruptcy are going to be of every political hue. Some of them are going to bear more responsibility than others for the financial peril that they find themselves in. Birmingham has been dealt a particularly unhappy hand of cards, but local authorities up and down the country are now warning that there will be little money left over for services used by most residents. So libraries, parks are at risk because the amount of money that goes on social care is absolutely immense. Social care and children's services, the amount of cash going on these things is immense. And you know what worries me, already you know what worries me, is that certain characters in our media and political firmament will use it as a stick with which to beat the recipients of children's and social care. It will be, all these kids getting help, it's terrible, or all these old people, all these poorly people getting help. That's what will happen, rather than looking at the distribution of wealth or the consequences of austerity or the rest of it. They'll be looking at the recipients and complaining, and it will be a hard invitation to resist. It really will. But I'm just putting that on your horizon, because I don't know the best way into it until things actually start closing down. Children's services driving overspending by councils to new heights. And there is probably some argument about them being held ransom by providers in a dysfunctional market. But I mention that because it sits alongside the story we're going to talk about. And the story we're going to talk about is one that I can never quite believe. I mean, I understand it perfectly. And there's one element to it I don't quite understand. But I can't quite believe it. It comes from our friends at Quorum, the charity that have looked at childcare support and have looked at what is likely to happen and what is happening. And it looks as if only 34% of English councils who responded to their questions have got sufficient childcare places in place. It's actually gone down on last year, and it is partly a consequence of costs surging, places dwindling and costs surging. That's the warning from Quorum today, whose managing director spoke to Nick Ferrari earlier. I'm just interested in the cost and the inability to find a place. So in the first instance, quite a few of you picking up upon Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown's appearance in our news bulletin shortly after we'd had a conversation about the sometimes unjustified self-confidence and swagger of beneficiaries of private education. I don't know where he went to school, Ian, David, John, any more than you do, but I do. Yes, he did appear almost to have been scripted, that contribution to the news bulletin in the context of the conversation we just had. But this one that we're looking at now about nursery prices, I'm interested in two things. I'm interested in how punitive the pricing is. I couldn't quite believe a graph that I saw earlier. In Germany, the percentage of your income that you spend on nursery childcare is close to negligible. So in Germany, you are having childcare for your children, nursery childcare for your children, and you're barely going to notice the cost. It seems to me to be such an obvious prioritisation politically that I can't quite believe why it hasn't happened. I know that the short answer is because it costs an awful lot of money. But if you say from 6 months or from 12 months, the role of the state should be the same with regard to children as it is when they start primary school. It shouldn't cost you an arm and a leg. The bit I don't understand is why, when we look at nursery costs, the clamour isn't greater. I've never quite grasped why this becomes such an obvious and urgent issue when we talk about it. And yet politically, it's never gathered the momentum that you would expect it to gather. I think it's because everyone can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's because when you're looking at spending in excess of 25% of your disposable income every month on childcare, you're just focusing desperately on the light at the end of the tunnel. So, this is just a theory. I'll give you the questions that I want you to answer in a minute. But my theory, even if you've got a massive gap between your children, you're in a tiny minority. For most people, you're looking at the cost and you're thinking, this is absolutely insane. How can this possibly be justified? Here's one. 2 children under 3. James, this is from Ben, who's in Faversham. £2,100 a month. And I need to know about what's going to happen in April when that new scheme is supposed to kick in, because it doesn't look as if the news is going to be good for many people. I think that because we are focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel and we know that political change is slow and grinding, It doesn't gather the momentum that you might expect it to gather if you happen to tune into a phone-in about it and hear people describing what Ben's just described. By the time they start primary school, you're home and dry. You've got £2,000. I mean, you could always send them privately, but that was the last hour. But you've got £2,000 a month spare when the kids go to primary school. So that's why it doesn't gather the critical mass that when we first started talking about it on the programme, years after I paid for childcare, and it didn't take anything like the chunk out of my income that it would do now, I think the reason why it's never gathered critical mass is that it's temporary for everyone. It's temporary for everyone. And you don't think, even if you desperately wanted this to be addressed, by the time anything changed, your kids probably would have left nursery anyway. So I think that's why politicians get away with ignoring it, because we're all focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel. So imagine you're Ben, £2,100 every month after tax. After tax. It's 20 grand, 24 grand a year. Well, you have a few holidays, I suppose. So give or take, you've got to earn 40 grand to have that before tax, to have that clear to pay. So you would think that there would be not quite marches on the street, but you would think that there would be huge pressure on politicians to fix this. And there isn't. And the reason why there isn't is that it will soon be over. Here's another one, a 3-year-old in nursery. From 8 till 5 days a week, it's £1,500 a week. £1,500 a week. Now, in Germany, it's heavily subsidised. So I think that my taxes at the moment should be going towards your children's childcare. In the same way that my taxes, whether I've got kids in school or not, my taxes go towards your children's education. It seems to me to be a social good that children get looked after. It's a benefit to the whole of society. But at the moment, it doesn't work like that. At the moment, you have to find the money yourself, and there'll be an awful lot of people who can't afford it. So, can we talk about everybody's different experiences on this one? So, I will begin with some calls from people who can't quite believe how much they're paying, and I want to know about the differences it's made to your life, because this isn't a choice. This is different from the conversation about private education. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I want to know about that. I want to know why it is so expensive. And I know we've had this conversation before, and I know that you've told me, but it still doesn't quite land with me. How can it cost so much? 0345 6060 973. And then I want to know what is going to happen. So if you're in the sector, either as a supplier or indeed a parent, what's going to happen with Rishi Sunak's plans to expand the availability of it? It's not free, it's paid for, but not by you. So I think that's due to kick in any minute now, and I don't think that people are ready for it. So just shock me with the reality of your situation. Tell me how your life is adjusted to accommodate this extraordinary cost of childcare. And then whether you're involved in it or not, together we can try to work out why is it so expensive compared to other countries like Germany, and also compared to where it was 20 or 30 years ago. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I'll read this from Karen, because it's always important to recognise how unpleasant some people are. She says, 14 years ago, I had 2 kids in nursery. When I bemoaned the cost to work colleagues, the responses were, it's what you signed up for and you should have kept your legs crossed. So basically, you can't complain because you should have done your research. Well, I mean, that's simply not true, is it? You can complain that things are really expensive, even when you've got no choice but to pay for them and buy them. I just don't understand why it is so expensive here compared to other countries, and indeed compared to 14 years ago or 20 years ago. So that's it. That's your setup. Number 10's childcare plans are imperilled by rising costs. So we're supposed to be extending it by September 2025. Most working families with children under the age of 5 will be entitled to 30 hours of childcare support. This is starting next month in phases. It starts in April, and yet Quorum, the charity, have found that costs are rocketing and places are dwindling. So what is actually going on? And how likely is it that Rishi Sunak's whiz-bang policy is going to touch the sides of demand? Okay, there it is. 0345 6060 973. What are you doing? Okay. Are you changing your life to avoid paying nursery costs? Are you giving up work, making completely different decisions? Or are you absolutely crucifying yourself in order to get through this period of time at the end of which your children will be going into the state system and you will be able to keep that money again? That's what I want to know. I want to know the impact that the cost of childcare is having on your life, whether you're paying for it or not. 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. It's 12:14.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
So I tell you what we can do. Like, we can do what we did with school dinners. Patrick's already started. He's in Denmark. My childcare per week in Denmark is 155 GBP, British pounds, £155 per week. So do me from other countries as well, wherever you are in the world. I suppose most obviously other European countries, but just drop me a text or send me a WhatsApp. That's what Patrick has done. So 0345 6060 973. And just tell me what it is, because in this country, it could be 10 times that figure. And then we'll try and get to the bottom of the why of it. So what are you paying elsewhere? That's just for WhatsApps, 0345 6060 973, or texts, 84850. And then on the phones, we'll look at what's going on here in Blighty and what is going to happen when Sunak's plans kick in. They're going to work for some people, but arguably they're going to not work for more people than are going to benefit from them. Charlotte's in Worcester. Charlotte, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Charlotte.
It's quite a long one, so I do apologise. So I'm looking at it from several perspectives, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Fill your boots.
So I still do teaching, but I'm not a full-time contracted teacher anymore, but I've been teaching since 2004. I would like to stay in the state sector, just linking into last hour. But basically, education isn't childcare. So when you were talking about, why doesn't the state step in, from 12 months, 6 months, it's because nursery is childcare, school is education.
No, I'm not stupid, Charlotte. I mean, crikey, I know the difference between it, but they subsidise it in other countries. So in Denmark, in Finland, so it does happen, and it's different things, but different but the same.
Yeah, it's just that lots of people don't know that, and it's really important.
Go on, tell me more.
So the next thing is why does nursery cost so much? So if I go back to my daughter in 2011, it was costing £700 a week, was it, or a month? I can't remember. A month, something like that, I think, for 4 days a week. And
that's a fraction of what it is now.
Yeah, it is. And we couldn't afford it back then on our wages, and it was absolutely horrendous. But I look at now, my friend who's worked in nurseries for the last 20-odd years, and you look at how many people they have to have per child ratio, and it goes, there's less children per adult as they get older. But if you think they're only paying those people minimum wage, how much that's going to cost, right? And those people deserve a lot more than minimum wage. And they're there from 8 till 6, so there might be shift workers, like an early shift and a late shift. And you've got to have so many staff on. You've got all the managers that obviously need paying, and then you've got the Senkos that need paying, and all these people need paying a bit more money. And then you've got to add into that all your electricity, your gas, your training.
I'm going to have to say it again. I'm not completely stupid. Some of the stuff that you're sharing with me is bleeding obvious, Charlotte. I must have given you the impression in my introduction that I didn't know anything. I appreciate they have to pay electricity bills in nurseries. I'm not sure that we needed to have that spelt out for us. But we don't know. We don't know because the ratios haven't changed much over the years. Guess how much it is in Sweden. Go on, have a guess how much it is in Sweden.
I don't know, but I'm guessing probably nothing.
£145 a month. £145 a month, and child allowance, which every child gets, is £160 a month. So actually having a child, you make a £15 profit on the month by having a child in care, and it's all delivered by private providers, but it's going to be government subsidised.
And do you know what? I'm all for that, but what we're going to have to do, James, is we're going to have to put in a lot more taxes, and I'm up for paying more taxes, especially for all the current public services that are in there. But can you imagine what the rest of the country would say? I mean, you talk about Germany.
We may be surprised. You don't know till you try it. Do you want to know something funny? Well, not funny, but something a bit coincidental.
Go on then.
Whereabouts in Worcester are you exactly at this moment in time?
I'm in Breedon.
Breedon. Okay, I did my A-levels about 3 miles from where you're sitting at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did them at King's Worcester.
Oh, right, okay.
So just because I got expelled from my actual school, and the only school in the area that was doing the same exam board as the one I was entered for was King's School Worcester, so I had to go there and sit my exams. Small world,
oh my goodness.
Small world.
It is a small
there
world.
You go. World exclusive, that. 22, I'd forgotten completely about that. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. Sarah's in Harlesden. Sarah, what's going on?
Hi, James.
Hey,
I have 2 children, and the eldest of which is 4. He started school last September, but his brother is 2 and still goes to nursery.
Yes.
So for my youngest child, I'm paying over £1,533 a month.
Front door.
So at one point, they were both at nursery together. So if, in effect, I was paying 3 mortgage payments.
Every
one
month.
On the house, one on the youngest, and one on the eldest. And I just want to bring something back.
Yeah.
These aren't social charities. These are companies who wouldn't exist if they didn't make a profit.
No, that's true.
And so someone's making a profit. If you think for one child, and bearing in mind my youngest, the 2-year-old, he only does 4 days a week in nursery. It's not even a full week in nursery. It's 4 days, and it's over £1,500 a month.
It's an extraordinary amount of money, isn't it? So
yeah, and I do think we need to get a financial expert on. Just for example,
everyone's
my
calling me
nursery
stupid
chain,
today. What's wrong with me? What do you want to know? Give me some. I'll do it.
Well, our nursery chain is owned by a Canadian pension fund. So a lot of nurseries in the UK have been bought up by private equity companies.
Great.
So I think places are disappearing because I think places are just getting much more expensive.
And they're going to go. No one's going to get on top of it, are they?
Yeah, and if you look at my nursery, it's all old mums. They're the only mums who can afford it. Like the young mums just can't.
Are going to give up
it.
work and stay at home.
Yeah,
probably.
Exactly.
And then suffer for the rest of their careers as a consequence. If that's not what they wanted to do, but they felt financially compelled to do it, then you're looking at, good Lord. Why? I mean, I'm just looking. Where's La Rioja? Do you think that's in Spain? Isn't it? Probably. So my boy started school at 3. For 3 months to 3, it's €170 a month, including lunch. A state-run guarderia. It's amazing. Well, we seem to have just sleepwalked into one of the worst scenarios in the world in this sector.
Correct. And also, I just want to make a point that women don't feel they have a choice. And it's not even about keeping up with your career. To be honest, I would love to give up work and just do this full time. But it's about your pension contributions. If you think like relationships, marriages don't last anymore, and that's the sad reality. Like, no one, of course, gets married and thinks, okay, we're going to get divorced at some point, but that's the reality, and there is so much pressure on your relationship. The biggest one being a lack of money. I have no disposable income. I can't get my hair coloured anymore, so I've got grey roots. I can't go and get my eyelashes. I don't wear fake nails because I just can't afford any of those things. We have zero disposable income.
When your youngest starts school, you'll be a bit more solvent again. So you're that light at the end of the tunnel family that I was describing a bit.
But say, for example, with the 4-year-old, now that he's at school, the school day is very short in comparison to the work. So I've got to pay for breakfast club. Yeah. I've got to pay for after school club. Of course, it's much cheaper than a full-time nursery, but you've still got those costs to pay.
It's all there. And I mean, I don't know how alone you feel, but you're far from alone. Everybody's getting in touch with similar stories, and yet none of that touches the sides of your struggle. And it is a genuine struggle. And there are choices being made that are going to have impact for decades to come. I hadn't thought about the imbalance of a relationship breakdown. I'd love to give up work and look after the children, but if the marriage fails a few years down the line, then the imbalance in our status will be obscene. It will be huge because I won't have been in the workplace for 5 years. Thank you, Sarah. I'm just trying to get as many voices as possible on. Dusseldorf calling. The cost for a nursery school varies per German state, but here it is no cost to parents at all of income. Nationwide, you get €250 a month per child, regardless of your income. So that's a sort of universal child benefit, which we had in this country until David Cameron became Prime Minister. But in some German states, you have free childcare. I don't know what has happened. Were we not paying attention? I'm being inundated now with other countries. I'm getting too much. Southern Italy, my younger brother pays for my nephew €35 a month, 8:30 to 12:30, which also includes a snack and a piece of fruit. My wife and I are both NHS workers, and in going back 24 years, we were paying £450 a month for the childcare. 24 years ago, that wouldn't cover 1 week now at the same place. 28 after 12. Claire is in Faversham. Are you married to Ben?
Unfortunately not.
No, because Ben in Faversham was the first contributor to this conversation via text. I just thought it would be maybe you didn't know he'd got in touch.
Maybe we could hang out, go to a play centre or something.
You can share childcare costs, because that, I suspect, is what you're about to tell me about.
Yeah, exactly. So we moved to Kent with my 2-year-old a year ago from London, because we were living in London, and the childcare that we were paying was about £2,000 a month. And that was a perfect storm of interest rates then starting to spike and our mortgage going through the roof. And even though we both earned pretty well, me and my husband, it was just unfeasible. And my mum, and we're really lucky for this, said if we move to Kent, she'll look after my son 2 days a week, which has saved us a lot of money. But then, of course, there is, and we're very grateful to her and very lucky, but the impact of that is then obviously there's a lot of money that we then spend on commuting to London. And I changed jobs, and I was really limited in the amount of jobs I could go for, because someone has to let me leave at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday to be able to be back to collect him. So it's kind of a perfect storm of the expenses. And where we're at now is we don't think, we potentially can't afford to have another child.
And these are big decisions, aren't they? I mean, so that's the conversation that you're having. And the light at the end of the tunnel is still a fair way off, especially if you have another child, then you'll be living in these sort of circumstances for another 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't just the cost in London, but it was also the quality. I mean, that was £2,000 for him to be in a flat above a shop. Yeah. And there was no outside space or many games for him either.
I don't know why we put up with it. It's so bizarre, isn't it? The redistribution or the reallocation of wealth. I was reading a bit about it last night over the last 20 years in America and in the UK, more so than in other European countries. The people who started that 2-decade period with the most have accrued more and more and more and more, and you sort of have to recognise at some point that the rest of us are just not getting the return on our side of the deal that we thought we'd signed up for when we became adults, Claire. It's as if we're just too busy surviving to get on with living.
It is surviving, absolutely. And as your previous caller mentioned, it does unfortunately have a disproportionate effect on women. And not to say men aren't affected in any way, but in terms of career and choices, and more women back in the workforce is better for everyone.
Yeah, and workforce is, or employers not doing enough either. So trying to look at this from other angles, so the thing you just described there. I mean, I can go back nearly 18 years to when my oldest was a baby. And we did a little job swap with a Danish journalist. My wife and her swapped jobs, and they came and lived in our house, and we went and lived in Copenhagen just for a week. I mean, it wasn't like a TV documentary or anything like that. But the thing that shocked us most was the accommodation that employers made for parents, and the way that if both parents were on the scene, if they were cohabiting, then they would have 2 days a week each when they would leave early to do the school run. And that, so that minimises the impact on an individual employer, because it was centrally thought through, and you would, register that right enshrined in law. So you would literally just have your parenting accommodated by your employer. And it's not going to have an impact on productivity or make anything less efficient. It's just going to be the new normal. And that's what you should be doing. But there's no pressure. 12:31 is the time. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 25 to 1. It is just surreal, this story, isn't it? About Kate, Middleton, Windsor, Princess Wales person. It's surreal. So I have television screens in the studios, you know. I like to keep an eye on things. And they're still talking about it, not at this precise moment in time, but all day it's been coming up and down. But there's nothing to say except conspiracies, which they're not doing. I mean, why would you go to a garden centre to... Well, I know, don't phone me up and say to buy some plants or to get some peat, some compost. I just can't make head nor tail of any of it. Well, I've got no idea what's going on. I've got no idea what's going on. And nobody has got any idea what's going on. It's like being at geography when I was doing my GCSEs. Nobody knows. You'd have this teacher and you'd ask him a question. And he said, don't know. Nobody knows. Don't need to know. If it wasn't on the curriculum, he didn't know. All he knew, the only geography he knew was the GCSE curriculum. I feel like that. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. What the hell is going on? So they go to a garden centre and one member of the public in the whole garden centre takes some footage of them from his car. He doesn't even get out of his car. And then the newspaper gets hold of it and they publish it. And we're all supposed to go, oh, thank goodness for that, she's fine. But if we were worried that she wasn't fine... Why wouldn't they have? I just don't know and this is basically British broadcasting now for the last 3 weeks. It's just a bunch of people sitting around looking at photographs going, I don't know what's going on. Do you know what's going on? I don't know what's going on. Do you know what's going on? I don't know what's going on. And here's our royal expert who also doesn't know what's going on, but will say some words that sound vaguely plausible. Hello, I'm the royal expert. What you have to understand is that she's a young mother and has children and arms. She also has arms and legs and hair. And therefore, we must all be most mindful at this time of her privacy. And also, I think she should come out of privacy and tell us all that she's okay. I've no idea what is going on. But the longer it goes on, the more, just as a nice person, the more worried you get. This is not a normal country. Christopher asks a very pertinent question. He says, surely the royals have gardeners. I hadn't thought of that. What are they doing in a garden centre? What are they going to be buying in a garden centre? Might be one of those garden centres that does like weird sweets. Have you got one of those near you? You go in there and you can buy, like a plastic tub of shrimps, like sweet shrimps or licorice, all sorts. Maybe they were just popping in for some travel sweets. You can usually buy travel sweets in a garden centre, but no, I don't know. It's and Will tells me you're not allowed to buy peat anymore. All right, mate. How about compost then? Are you allowed to buy compost? Compost. I meant compost. It's a very strange world. 12:39 is the time, and we've barely touched on childcare costs in the last 4 minutes. We've been too busy marvelling at the state of the media. Luckily, Jessica is in Skipton to rectify matters immediately. Jessica, what would you like to say?
I was just ringing up because I'm a mother.
Because you've seen Kate Middleton through your sitting room window.
Oh, I feel really sorry for her.
I do too.
So I'm a mother of a 2.5-year-old.
Right.
He is shipped around all week so that I can run my business.
Yeah.
He goes to my mum. He's in childcare. Well, with my mum one day. He's at nursery 1 full day and 2 half days.
Right.
And unfortunately, I would absolutely love to have a better balance that I could run my business much more kind of, so I don't dash here, there and everywhere constantly. But it doesn't work like that. It's £700 a month for me to have him in childcare 2 full days. Like, that's a week.
It's
that's
absolutely
crazy.
Bonkers. So you're just peddling, really, until he starts school. Well, I mean, you might want to have... other children, so your whole life really is a jigsaw in which childcare is several pieces.
Yeah, so when the 15 hours comes in 2 weeks, I'll actually have another 11 hours a week of working, which will transform my week.
Oh, that's great news.
Yeah, so it's a big thing for us. It's like a.
Is it definitely happening? The nursery has got the place, and it's all cost.
And they've been wonderful.
Oh, I mean,
they totally messed up with the codes. We're working on a temporary code right now, because the system. Nobody told us that the system, when you refresh it every 3 months, you get your code. If you refresh it at the wrong point, you don't get your code in time. So therefore, they have to send you out a temporary code through the post. Blah 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 blah. It's the government, right? So So we have to expect some level of...
Well, the teething troubles, but with a happy ending for you, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Will you have another? Forgive me for being so intrusive, but would you have done in a different universe? Or are you happy with just the one?
I'm 40. I don't need to be worried about having another child.
No, I was just struck by people contacting me to say we would like to have another child, but we can't afford to. We literally can't afford to.
Childcare isn't the barrier for me having another child, which is really a lovely thing.
Yes.
And but the time that it takes to concentrate on a child and to be that child's everything, and I'm so privileged to be able to run a business flexibly. Like, I feel like I'm not somebody who who has set hours. I'm really
with that flexibility comes some of the benefits that you're able to enjoy. But you're absolutely right. If you've got a nasty boss who doesn't let you have any leeway or flexibility whatsoever, your life becomes worse in every imaginable way, not just while you're at work, but outside work. There's stuff going on. Thank you, Jessica. It's just gone 12:42. Apparently it's a farm shop, not a garden centre. Who told me it was a garden centre? Did you tell me? Who said it was a garden? Why did you say it was a garden centre, Keith? I didn't read it on a tweet. I just thought it was I don't know why I thought it was a garden centre. It's a farm shop. Well, that's a completely different stuff. Of course, you could have cocked up at a farm shop, but it was a garden centre that I thought was suspicious. Farm shop. Everyone goes to a farm shop of a Sunday. And what do you buy in farm shops? You get what, nice meat, don't you? You get some nice meat and some vegetable biscuits. Perhaps they got a nice cafe. Maybe they had a scone. Might have gone for a scone. This is what is happening on television. You think this is what television is now? People sitting around saying maybe they bought some, I don't know, some sprouts, some leeks. Rich is in Birmingham. Back to childcare. Rich, what would you like to say?
James, I've got a 2.5-year-old at the moment that's been going to nursery 3.5 days a week.
Yeah.
My wife is off on a Monday, so my children are with her on a Monday. But the cost is roughly around £800 a month for our one daughter.
I mean, how do people do this?
Well, we're struggling, and we've got a 9-month-old that's going to be going into nursery month after next, and we've worked it out. It's going to be around £1,400. So it's hard, and with the government scheme that came in, as soon as that came in, it works out like 11 hours free. But then our nursery raised the prices, which completely.
You're the second person who's told me this. They've put their prices up as the new scheme comes in. Is it a coincidence, or is it a response to the?
It's a response because they're probably, it's the government, isn't it? They're probably not communicating effectively enough to the nurseries who are kind of in crisis in a sense.
Your phone line's a bit glitchy, mate, but I feel for you because that's almost as if you're going to work just to meet your childcare bills and then treading water until they start proper school, and then you start being able to hang on to some of this money. It's all gone a bit Pete Tong over here. Apparently it was their own farm shop now, someone's telling me. Someone has said that why are you spreading misinformation, James? I'm not spreading misinformation. I'm just making some mistakes by accident. Is it their own farm shop? It's in Windsor, so it's a Windsor farm, so it's their own farm shop. Do you think they get a discount? Do they get sourdough bread? Carl says. Admittedly, Carl is as qualified to contribute to this conversation as the average royal expert on breakfast television, so he could be making it up as he goes along. But it sells, hang on, Neil's been there, it sells stuff that the Windsor Park produces, like vegetables, game meat, and ham from their own pigs. So there it is. Finally, we got to the bottom of that little riddle. 12:45 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:49, and I wasn't planning on doing this. It's a sort of side order, if you like, to the conversation about childcare costs. But the continuing confusion about the Princess of Wales and the visit to a farm shop this weekend, which I've been surprisingly diverted by. Milo in Marlow is familiar with the establishment and says he thinks it's actually King Charles's shop. It's definitely not cheap, and it's got little turrets at the gate like a mini Windsor Castle. That sounds nice. Scott, however, has dropped some serious news. He thinks, looking at the number of bags, Scott thinks that they maybe did the big shop there. You can't do the big shop in a farm shop, can you? I mean, for a start, where are your cleaning products? You can't, and also I don't think they do a big shop. Some people are even questioning whether it's really them in the footage, but I mean, that's silly. It's not like they're going to wear their crowns to go shopping. But more scandalous would be the idea of doing the big shop at the... I mean, do you still do a big shop? If you live near a supermarket, you don't need to do a big shop. Maybe it's the same with a farm shop. If you live near a farm shop, you don't need to do the big shop. You just pop in and get what you need for tonight's tea. Maybe they're just getting tonight's tea. But Scott's had a really close look at the video, and he's adamant that judging by the number of bags and their apparent fullness, it would appear that they have done the big shop at the farm shop, which is, I mean, it's all right for some, isn't it? I tell you what, they're not having their lifestyle curtailed by childcare costs if they're doing the big shop at the farm shop. Rowena is in Barnet. I bet you don't do the big shop at a farm shop, do you, Rowena?
Sadly not.
No, none of us do. None of us do. What made you pick up the phone? Apologies.
So lots of times you've done the phone in about childcare costs, and I haven't ever phoned in, although I've wanted to.
Yes.
And it just kind of got to me today because I have 3 children.
Right.
One daughter is at school, and I've got twin daughters.
Oh.
And
they are with you
3
now.
Years old.
Yes,
yeah.
I can tell.
I'm sorry about
I'm psychic.
the noise.
It's lovely. It's one of the best noises in the world. One of the most lovely sounds in the world. Happy children.
It depends how long you've had to.
Yes, I know. I am aware of that.
But so when I had my first child, I thought, okay, well, when I have another child, it was always a plan to have a second child. And then I thought, well, I'll just go straight back to work when they're sort of 6 months, standard. And then I obviously ended up with twins, which was totally unexpected. And then we investigated the cost of childcare and our local sort of what you call private nursery was £100 a day.
Good Lord. Per child?
Per child.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about twins.
£1,000 a week per child.
Yeah.
No, sorry, for both children. That's
£1,000 per week all in. That is absolutely... I mean, that's just prohibitive. That means you can't... So what are you going to do?
Yeah, so I've had to not go back to work, and it's not just not going to work. It's also the mental health aspect of you not returning to work. So I've been sort of effectively stuck at home with twins. And I know a lot of people will say they can go out, they can do what they want, but I found it very restrictive.
Well, clearly, I think having double bubble is probably something that very few people fully understand, actually.
Yeah,
it's
so
tough
I haven't,
for you,
lots of people go to baby groups and they go to all these, things that they say that makes their motherhood experience worth it. But for me, the last 3 years has been totally restrictive because my children haven't been able to go to a childcare facility. And
so it's all on you. It's all on you.
Absolutely, all on me. I mean, my mum comes. Thankfully, my mum doesn't have to work. She has been able to come here most days to help me.
Yeah.
But then, so they've started at nursery in January, but then they had to delay it because they had glue ear and they had to have an operation and so on and so on. And then, so now they've started, but since they've started, they've never actually done a full day.
Well, it will get better, won't it?
That's what everyone.
Well, that's because so we have to say something, Rowena. When you present us with this litany of misfortune, we have to say, well, it will get better, and it will. But you are another example, and who knows what impacts it's going to have moving forward, the time that you've taken out of doing what you might have otherwise done
Well, absolutely. I've been 6 years out of work, and so now, it's all the knock-on effects. You lose your confidence. You think, oh, gosh, can I do X, Y, and Z now? Oh. And so shall I just get the menial job locally? And that's all I'm worthy for. And then you don't feel worthy.
No, I know. You should do, but words are cheap, aren't they? Cheap and easy. Yeah, and I think you've expressed your situation really powerfully, actually. To The twin element is something that had never really occurred to me before. But if you're having an entire radio phone in about the difficulties of doing something, then for Rowena, you just double it. You times everything by 2, because there's 3 children there, so it's you just weren't expecting to have that double responsibility, and you've put it across incredibly well. And I'm still baffled by the simple tolerance of it. The reason why other countries, other comparable European economies have a completely different approach to this, and yet here we are, watching people, listening to people like Rowena every call of this hour who just it's just not fair. It just doesn't seem fair. It doesn't sound fair. I'm still getting a lot of messages about the farm shop, but I don't know how many of them are taking it as seriously as they should. Alan's in Granada in Spain. He points out if you did do the big shop at the farm shop, you could go to Poundland or similar for all of your cleaning products and other sort of, what are they called? Those aisles. And so we should look out for those photos next, probably. 12:55 is the time. I don't know how you do it, the money. Listen to that. That's £1,000 a week. Just to be, how can people do this? Are you literally handing over almost more money than you earn for childcare for 3 or 4 years? Just knowing that when you get to the end of that road, then you'll be able to actually hang on to your earnings again. Mark's in Tunbridge Wells. Mark, what made you pick up the phone?
James, good afternoon. Well, James, hello, I've got three kids, 18, 6 and 20 months.
Right.
Now, the 18-year-old we put through public school, and he finished last year, went to uni, and I thought, great, don't have to pay fees anymore for him. Didn't put the next 2 through because couldn't afford to do so they're in state. But I'm currently paying £2,500 a month for full-time care for the 20-month-olds and some wraparound care for the 6-year-olds. And there's some comments earlier about how this impacts on women. This has impacted my wife in the opposite way. I've had to hawk her back out to work again, which she's none too pleased about, to earn the salary.
This has all gone a bit 19th century, Mark. So because the way things balance out, you couldn't meet the costs without more income. But if she wasn't working, wouldn't that have taken away the need for the costs?
No, because one, look, I'm joking slightly. She does want to work, but she doesn't want to work full time.
No,
but we had to do that in a balance to get there, and we've done things like we've had to put a mortgage to an interest-only mortgage to free up some income to be able to pay the childcare. Yeah. Interesting, my childcare now is almost double what the private school fees used to be for full-time.
This reminds me of
education.
when people say it costs more to send someone to prison than it does to send them to Eton. That's what that sounds. I can't make head nor tail of it.
The interesting thing is my wife grew up in France, and we're exploring going back to France, go to Bordeaux, and the same childcare, we've checked it, it would be just under €400 a month for exactly the same provision of childcare. So
you'd be over £2,000 a month better off in exactly the same circumstances, comparable circumstances, just by dint of being in France as opposed to being in England. Slightly better in Scotland as well. Not slightly better, twice as good in Scotland than it is in England in terms of what your entitlements are. But goodness me. Thank you, Mark. Take care. And Rowena, if you're still listening, we really stumbled into something there with the twin element. Quite a few people in the same situation as you, feeling seen, which I sense is a bit rare. I also have twins, James. It's impossible to get them into nursery, so I now work part-time. My mother has to help on a weekly basis. For the mental health point of view that Rowena talked about, I've continued working, but I couldn't have done it without my mother. I'd never thought of twins as being, I mean, it sounds like a stupid thing to say, as being twice the amount of work as having one baby. But of course, in the context of childcare, it doubles absolutely everything. That is it from me for another day. We'll be doing it all again tomorrow morning from 10. If you did miss any of today's show, then you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, which is the official LBC app, and it's where you can also pause and rewind live radio. So do download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4. But now on LBC, it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.